Welcome to meeting 6 for Group 1 in CIT 261. 28. Today we're going to start off with a lesson by Catherine, and then we're going to have Catherine.
All right, can you guys see my PowerPoint?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so I'm doing JavaScript events. So basically JavaScript events are driven by things that the user does or that the browser does, and they are things you can put into different HTML elements to cause certain things to happen. So it's kind of a way to intermix JavaScript code with your HTML. So there's a lot of different types of events, so I won't go over all of them, but here's kind of a breakdown of how I like to categorize everything. Probably the most common ones I use are the mouse events. And then with this class, I've been learning more about touch events for mobile devices. And then sometimes I use browser events, like when loading a page or something. And then also cover a little bit about animation and transition events. So the important thing to remember with events is not all events are supported with specific tags. So that's something you definitely will want to look into with like W3 Schools or just Google. Like for example, the onClick is supported by everything except for like some of the tags listed here. And onLoad is only supported by just a small handful of tags. So that's definitely something to keep in mind, because I've tried doing events and then later I realized why it wasn't working is because it's not supported. So kind of a general syntax is you'll have your element in your HTML tag, and then you'll have an event with an assignment operator, and then whatever JavaScript you want to put in there. Generally, I put in functions to my JavaScript to keep my HTML code nice and clean. But here's some examples. So you can have I just use onClick because it's a simple one, but you can put in any event right there. And then either call a function, and you can actually use either double quotes or single quotes. My personal preference is double quotes. And then actually the function you can pass in strings or variables. Just be sure to use different quotes than the ones that are on the outside. And then something I learned recently is you can actually do this dot something like in our HTML, and then have your function return something, and it will assign your inner HTML to whatever that function returned. And so I found that useful. And you can actually pass in your element to the function by using this. And so then you don't have to go document.getElement by ID or anything. It just already knows what object we're working with. And it seems like most events are supported with like the onClick equals like within the element tags, but there are some that need event listeners, and so they're you just have to put it in a script tag in your HTML right before the closing body tag, and then you just get the element by ID that you're trying to put the event onto. The event listener, and then the first parameter is your event, and the second is a function. And it's kind of weird syntax because you won't add the parentheses like you would typically. So it's just the function name. So that's just kind of something to keep in mind. So that's the end of my presentation. Here's my web page. It's not very pretty, but I just kind of wanted to show some examples. So like, for example, this first one is click. If I click it, it triggers an event to do something. And double click, if I click it once, does nothing, but if I double click, it does it. So it's kind of beneficial. And then this one, I kind of have it so if I click the mouse down and hold it down, it's going to say down, And then when I let go and it goes up, it changes back to mouse is up. And then this one's more of kind of like a hover event, like the mouse has entered. So I like that one, it's kind of fun. And then here's an animation event. And kind of starting the animation. And then it's repeating the animation. And then if I click it, it ends the animation. And then my transition event, starting transition, ends transition. And I also have an example of like a touch event, but I don't have a touch screen, so I can't really show you what it does. But basically you can touch it, you can move your finger kind of like a slide or something, and then when you let go, it ends it. So that's kind of just showing you what's going on. I'll just show you a little bit of code. It's pretty crazy looking code, quite honestly. So you can see there's like different events on like my different buttons. Show examples. And then I really liked the changing the inner HTML like this, just returning it from my functions. And so for the animations and transitions, I couldn't find a lot of examples on W3 Schools, but on like Google, I was able to find some. And pretty much all of them use the event listeners. So I'm not sure if that's, you have to, but I couldn't get them to work otherwise. So
yeah, I did the same thing.
Okay. So yeah, does anyone have any questions?
Nope.
All right, awesome.
I'm doing the same topic, and I've been wasting a lot of time because I didn't have the onload and event and the right proper tag.
Oh, yep.
Tried to figure out the error. It took a long time. Yep. All right. Let's see here. Ryan, you about ready?
I am ready. Yep.
All right. We can see your screen.
All right. We're going to go over CSS animation, specifically the designing, defining, and triggering animations without custom libraries. All right. So CS animations. First, the animation lets you generally change from one style to another. You can change CS properties you want and how many times you want them to change, which is different than a transition. A transition is pretty linear, going from one thing to another. But an animation, you can make changes whenever you want to different properties, and the number of properties doesn't matter. You just need to use the keyframe rules, which is going to tell the browser exactly when and what you want changed, and that within the keyframe you can, like I said before, you can change it however many times you want. So the keyframe rule is the important part. You have to have this this syntax keyframe at keyframes, and then you give that keyframe a name, and that's what you use in your code. And the keyframe rules tells it what, when, and how. So it specifies what's going to change. So inside the keyframe, you tell it exactly which properties you want. You tell it when you want them to change. And this is a little confusing when you first look at it, because when you do the animation property, you tell it how many seconds you want it to last. But then when you do the keyframe, it's based off of percentages of those seconds. So I'll show you a little bit about that later, but it can be a little confusing at first. So so it tells you when to change it, and it tells you how to change those properties. If you're changing from red to blue, or growing or scaling a different object. So the animation property itself has quite a few different different properties within it. So you have animation duration that obviously tells it how long it's going to take. You can set a delay on it. So like if you're loading a page, you can delay it a certain number of seconds before it starts. You can do iterations through that. So you loop through however many times you want the property to change. Generally, or how I've used it is just an infinite. So it just continuously loops through that animation. Direction, kind of like Catherine had her one of her transitions go, or her animation go forward and then back. You can tell it to do the reverse order. You can have it alternate so it goes back and forth constantly. And then the last one is the timing function, and this specifies how it goes through all of the keyframe timing. So you can ease in or ease out. So ease, you have your ease in, ease out. You have your linear, which keeps the time steady throughout the entire animation. And then you have the cubic Bezier. I think that's how it's pronounced. I don't know. But that lets you specify a little bit more dynamically how it works. So it can speed up and slow down and all sorts of fun stuff with that one. It's a little bit more complicated, but I'll show you an example of that. All right, so here's the shorthand for the animation. So if you were to list out all the properties, it gets pretty long. Sorry, this kind of went to 2 lines here in the PowerPoint, but it's really just 1 line. So you just start with the name is the first one, the duration, how you want the timing function, if you want any delays, the iteration count, and then the direction. Now you don't have to have all of these, but they do need to be in a fairly specific order. Like you can't flip the name and the timing duration. It doesn't really work that way. And then I do have a few examples. Let me kill the PowerPoint. All right, so this is some of the examples that I had worked on for another class. This first one, you can see it moves the circle around the boxes, but it also has a slight pause in the corners. So it's not quite linear. So I'll show you that one. Can you guys see that code pretty easily? Or is that too small?
It's fine.
I can see it.
Okay, good. All right, so here is my animation code right here. I've given it a name of orbit. It takes 3 seconds to get around the box. We are doing a linear. So the little pause in the corner is actually handled a little bit later in the actual keyframe. And then it has an infinite looping. So if we go down to the keyframe, so this is what I was telling you about of the percentages. So you have the 3 seconds up here, but then down here I'm telling it at 0% of those 3 seconds do this, and then at 5% do this. So that can get a little confusing there. So this is where you have the little pause. It's this little 5-second or 5% change. So we start first with a translation at 0, and then we pause that for the 5%, and then we go to the 300 and 300% to 0%, and that changes it from the top left corner to the top right corner. And then once again, we have a little 5% pause, and then we go to the 50%. So that's how it moves the little circle around. The next one, this box, we have a circle that turns into a square. And that one we have morphing circle square. Once again, it's the same thing, 3 seconds linear, infinite. But it goes At 0, it's a radius of 50%. At 25%, we still keep the radius and just change the color. And then at 50% of the time, so at 1.5 seconds, we change the radius to 0, so it goes back to a square. We change the background color to white, and then we start the transform for the rotating. Now we have to call that first before we change it in the next one. So then at 75%, it's still at a square, it's still white, but then we rotate it 90 degrees. And then at 100%, we change it back to a circle, we change it to dark red, and then we do rotate it one more time just to finish out the transform on that. And then the last example I have here is this box over here that has a heartbeat circle. And that's actually one of the easier ones of the three. So pulsing circle right here, we do it in 2 seconds. It's linear and it's infinite. So we just do some scaling functions. So at 44%, it's still at 1% scale. The opacity is 1. But then at 47, we scale it to 1.5 times, and then we lighten it just a little on the opacity. And then so we keep going through that to make it do the heartbeat just based off of the timing there. So, and then I did have one other example, a logo that I've been kind of working on. And so I'm actually going to restart it so you see what it looks like on the onload page. So it has some motion, it has some text that moves, it has the line that grows and shrinks, and then it has these circle that's been that just loops through infinitely. And that's all done with each one of those elements has its own keyframe. So we have an expand, which is for the divider line. We have a logo scale, which is the main scale to grow that when it first comes in. The fade is for the text itself when it comes in and moves. So it has the opacity, and it also has the left padding changes. And then the last one is the infinite loop for this little circle on the inside that just grows. And that's the one that I wanted to show on the cubic bezier right here. So it has 4 different stages, and each one of those has a specific number, and that's why it starts small, kind of pauses in the center, and then goes big. So that's based off of this cubic calculation right here. So, all right, any questions at all?
I don't have any, but that's looking really good.
Thank you.
And that looks awesome. So I know, like with this like section we're learning, it says to use without custom libraries. I don't really know what a custom library is. Is that like the WebKit things, or is that something different?
Like with you can do like Angular or Bootstrap, all those CSS frameworks that have just simple keywords. So instead of having to do like all of this, all the shorthand, you can it has built-in stuff, so you can just tell it, oh, I want this circle, and it just does all this in the background for you.
Okay, so if we just do the straight CSS, we're fine.
Yep, they're just frameworks that kind of like jQuery is to JavaScript, right? It just makes it simpler. That's basically what it is.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yep.
Good question.
All right, that's everything I have.
All right. Over to my screen. Okay. All right, so we're going to meet next Saturday at 10, and it looks like Casey, that's me, and Chris are assigned to teach. All right, we will see you guys next week.
All right, have a good week.
Thanks.
Bye.
Salute.